The preponderance of what I'm hearing from Trump voters writ large is they're like, heck yes. Like, let's drink liberal tears. Let's hit the gas. This is great. Elon's in there. RFK's in there, Trump's in there, and they're getting this thing done, and you guys hate it, go cry. The people that I'm talking to are people who are first-time Trump voters, right? They're an interesting group to me, and I think they're the first. It's sort of like what's that, LIFO, last in, first out? Like, they tend to be the ones, they're not deep committed MAGA, so they can be the ones who could swing back. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Focus Group podcast. I'm Sarah Longwell, publisher of the Bulwark, and this week I'm going to check in on how voters have been talking about Donald Trump's first 100 days. The first 100 days, big milestone here. And where do we think he and all of us are going to go from here? So Trump's approval rating is sitting around 48%, with his disapproval around 49%. So these numbers are worse than they were on Inauguration Day, but better than I'd like them to be. I don't know. But under the hood, the Biden to Trump voters we've been talking to are splitting into a couple of different camps, including some who don't think they're getting what they voted for, or maybe they're getting a little too much of what they voted for. And so that's what we're going to explore today. My guest is Mark Leibovich, staff writer at The Atlantic and author of Thank You for Your Servitude, Donald Trump's Washington and the Price of Submission. He also wrote, and it's not in here, This Town, which is the first time I ever met you in our parasocial relationship. I know you IRL now, but I remember sitting in my car reading This Town on my Kindle app, which was new for me then. And I loved it. I thought, who is this writer? He's so good.
And here I am. Wait, were you actually driving while you did this, Sarah? Because I would not want to, hazard you or any other, motorists.
Yeah, I'm not the safest of drivers.
Okay.
Don't be on the road with me. I'm reading people's books the whole way.
You know what? If you're going to do it, it might as well be mine. Well, thank you.
Might as well be yours. Speaking of things that you've written, you wrote an article right after the election called In Praise of Clarity. Loved this piece. And the basic thesis was that Democrats had a chance at a fresh start because this last election was such an unambiguous rejection of their brand. So fast forward to this week, and a few Senate Democrats just helped Republicans pass their spending package. So how do you think that fresh start's going?
Well, you can have a fresh start and have a sluggish start at the same time. I do think, I guess when I wrote that, the context was, look, you don't have the, well, if only the Electoral College was different, or, well, if the popular vote went differently, there was not foreign interference. There were a lot of instant rationalizations in 2016 for why this was a fluke, why this was a runoff. Day one, literally, you have this women's march. There were the resistance, as it were, I guess that was coined right around then, looked to be very, very well codified immediately. And I guess I think that was sort of helped along by what still seemed like a very bifurcated election. There was a sense of grievance among Democrats and so forth. Less so now. Look, obviously Democrats have not found their voice. They have not found their leaders. They are not reading from the same music sheet at this point. But look, I wouldn't have expected otherwise. These things do not coalesce this quickly. And look, I agree. I think Trump's poll numbers are maybe a little higher than I thought, but I also think they're basically meaningless right now. Biden's were well into the 50s at this time 4 years ago, right? Maybe 60s,
in March.
Right?
Yeah, so they were at, so I had looked at this because I'd done a comparison because people are like, well, Trump's high at 53. And I was like, well, Biden was at 62 in March. And so there's about a 10-point gap. So Trump is high relative to him, but not high relative to anyone else in the sort of last many presidents that we've had.
Right. No, I agree. I also think, though, that I think Trump is high relative to how his first 8 weeks have gone, which looks to me like they haven't gone well. Inflation is still a big problem. Seems to be a lot of chaos. There seems to be, the tariffs are not popular. There's a lot of other, the FAA stuff. The Doge stuff is not clean by any chance. Anyway, he seems to be weathering it to some degree.
Yeah, and look, we're going to get into some of the sound on this. I am starting to, and have now for a couple of weeks, started to pick up some of the, it's not buyer's remorse exactly, although sometimes I use that phrase, and I probably shouldn't, because buyer's remorse suggests they wanted to maybe purchase a different thing, or like they want to give it back and get something else. That's not really true, because nobody's saying, boy, I just really wish I'd voted for Kamala. It's more
Right.
that they're like, is this what we're doing? I
Right.
thought it was going to be maybe slightly more chill, and but they're also, people, they're called a honeymoon period for a reason, which is that people are still doing a little wait and see. Yeah, this is a lot. It's a lot, but maybe it'll be fine. We're going to wait and see, or I'm nervous about this. Um, but one of the things that I want to start with for this conversation, um, is some of the sound that we collected after Trump's speech to the joint session of Congress. You can call it State of the Union, whatever you want. But because I think it tells us a lot about how these voters are responding to the early days of Trump 2.0. And I found it particularly interesting to hear what people paid attention to and remembered versus what they didn't. Let's listen.
And it was interesting to see all the good stuff that was happening, like the Democrats couldn't even clap for, like the Lake and Riley thing, the boy who had cancer. And he's just like I understand we have our differences, but if you guys aren't even willing to support, a child with cancer or who finally defeated cancer or the Lake and Riley, it's like this is why not nobody, because millions of people still voted for that party, but this is why people cannot resonate with you guys. Like if you guys are so against somebody that you guys are willing to like not even support even the minute good things.
I'm still kind of shocked when I see him speak of how much time he's actually paying attention to the teleprompter versus in 2016, seriously, where he still kind of lips off every once in a while, but he's staying on literally the script. And then that goes to the second point about what he's saying. I listened to see if there's anything new. And I was like, that's not new. That's not new. So at the end of it, I was like, he didn't say anything new. And then I realized, oh, he's actually being consistent. The things he said he was going to do.
I thought he was very calm, composed. He wasn't so much on tangent. I've did my research and actually watched a few of his interviews from his 30s all the way to the past decades. And he's a lot more composed compared to 2016. And a lot of the things he was saying, they were fact. Those, reducing, finding the debt, legal immigration, even, when he was presenting DJ with his Secret Service badge, or, I guess Lincoln Ryan's parents were there. It's like you can dislike someone, but you don't have to have a casualty of, or the little boy had cancer, and then I heard people say, oh, well, he, I guess, removed cancer funding, but the little boy had cancer there. Like, why does that matter? The little boy had cancer, he survived. He's being honored. And if you can't support that or stand for that, then I don't really think you should be anywhere near the White House. But actually, I like Trump's speech. He was a lot more presidential this time. One thing I didn't like about the Democrats, especially the Jasmine Crockett person, just so unprofessional to me.
I think overall the speech was like reiterating what he is already doing. So I don't have any problem with the speech. I actually have problem with both the parties' members, how they acted more like childish. As many of already the people here said, there is no point like bringing in a placard saying this is not normal. And there is also no point someone else coming in and trying to take it from your hand and tear it off. It's like, these are our representatives, like act like adults, like actually work side by side, act like adults to work for the people of this country.
So here's what was crazy to me after listening to people's reactions to Trump's speech, which is the substance mattered very, very little. And what they remembered was they were mad at Democrats. And I heard a lot of this commentary. They were mad at Democrats for how they behaved to Trump, and not clapping for the boy who had cancer, because the Democrats had made a strategic decision to sit there in stony silence through everything. And so when Trump did his like feel good moments, and, pumped up the kid who had brain cancer, who wanted to be a Secret Service agent, like those were good made for TV moments. And Democrats looked to these voters like they were sort of ghouls for not cheering for that. But like that always strikes me as interesting when what people took away from Trump's speech was Democrats are bad. Like the Democrats sat there and did nothing, and still the Democrats were like the worst part of the speech. That's one thing. Then the second thing is how they're all like, Trump seems so presidential. Like he's so much better now than he used to be. He's chiller than he used to be. And I think that is, I don't know. I do hear that a lot from people. This idea that Trump has mellowed. Trump is now, he's got his act together. Look, he's on the prompter. But one thing I've been turning over in my head since the election is that is just this point, right? Trump is not abnormal to people anymore. And people have no problem thinking of him as presidential. So if anything, they expect other presidential candidates to like act like him. So these voters wanted the same level of respect shown to him as any president, right? They don't see anything abnormal about the way that he behaves. So when Democrats treat him as abnormal, like they have the signs or it doesn't land with these voters. Right? They're like, why are Democrats acting like this? Donald Trump is being so normal. So how do Democrats navigate that? Or like, what do you think is going on here?
Well, whatever they're doing, it didn't work. I mean, I think one thing that this speech reminds me of is, God, how much I hate these speeches now. I mean, I dread States of the Union at this point, whether Biden's the president, Trump is the president, whoever. I mean, these things are, no substance is transacted really. It would be nice if there was a bipartisan moment in which the poor kid with cancer were applauded and there was some joining of hands, or not hands literally, but, if that would have been a nice moment. It didn't happen. Look, I mean, Democrats had a very kind of, I think, this ineffectual response. It was I think many of them didn't show up. I mean, it was a home game. I pretty much everyone I know who didn't have to watch it for work, whether they work for the government or they are a journalist or something, didn't watch it. I mean, it just seemed like a very, very eye-rolling thing, no matter what side you're on.
Yeah, I guess my question is just, what do you do when you want to communicate that Trump is abnormal, that this is not normal, which was the sign that one of them was holding? And I, of course, agree with this particular sentiment. Like, what is happening right now is not normal. Yep. And yet Democrats are kind of caught in this bind with voters where Trump is perfectly normal to them now. He has been normalized. And so how did Democrats help the American people understand that what is happening is not normal, but at the same time not look like they're the crazy ones reacting crazily?
I mean, I basically their allies on their biggest allies on this are Trump himself, because he, in a way, I mean, he eventually does something on his own that makes him more unpopular, that undermines whatever goodwill there is out there. Not so much with his base, but no Democrat needs to say anything to help Donald Trump be Donald Trump. I mean, I do think the vacuum here is that Democrats just are so starved for leaders, any leaders, and their messaging has been so disconnected for so long. I mean, but if you just look again, these first 2 months, Trump has given Democrats so much to work with, message-wise. Look, it takes only 8 weeks to ruin a perfectly good economy, right? The whole idea of chaos everywhere, inflation not getting better, getting worse, arguably. It's three main points, and there's just no one is looking to them at this point, and no one is really asserting themselves to make these cases. But certainly the gimmicks you're not going to out-gimmick Donald Trump, first of all. And look, it's cute, but it's not winning over anybody. But look, I mean, Democrats desperately need someone to emerge. And since Barack Obama was elected in 2008, they just have put off finding their future leaders. It was Hillary's turn in 2016, and it's like, well, this is an emergency in 2020. Let's get old Joe. I think Biden, I would certainly say, and I think most people I know, would agree, that made a catastrophic mistake in even seeking a second term. And, now we don't have any new leaders. And, there's no resistance to Trump that anyone can coalesce around just now. But again, it's still very early.
Turning back to Trump for a second, and then I'm going to get into how the voters perceive this first 100 days. What do you think of his first 100 days?
One of the things that's striking to me, and having listened to some of the focus group before, and I've heard this throughout really his two terms, is he pats himself on the back all the time, and his supporters pat him on the back all the time about, oh, promises kept, promises made, promises kept. He's doing exactly what he's going to do. I mean, some of the focus group people said exactly that. In his first term, if you look at like the 4 big applause lines or the 5 big applause lines of the 2016 campaign, it was, we're gonna balance the budget so quickly, it'll be so easy. I mean, he did the absolute reverse of that.
Right.
Build a wall, Mexico's going to pay for it. Didn't happen. Drain the swamp. The swamp has never been healthier. What else? Infrastructure didn't happen. I mean, he didn't, basically whatever he campaigned on, the only thing maybe was the tax cut, which was all basically Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan, 2 of his mortal enemies. This time, I'm going to end inflation. It's going to be so easy. I'm going to end the Russia-Ukraine war in 24 hours. I'm going to get us out of these foreign entanglements. I mean, there was nothing said in the campaign about the Panama Canal, about Canada, about Greenland, about, occupying Gaza. Elon Musk was like no one paid much attention to him. No one knew that he was going to play the role he did. Inflation hasn't gone down. I mean, I probably should have led with that. So, I mean, the whole idea that he's doing exactly what he said he's going to do is complete nonsense and a complete triumph, in messaging, albeit dishonest messaging by Republicans.
Yeah. Well, so I want to sort of sort through, because these are all, again, these are people who voted for Biden and then they switched to Trump.
Yeah.
And so, and I've been sort of obsessed with these voters here in the first 100 days, because I'm wondering, are people getting what they asked for? Are they glad they switched? And so I would say over the last couple months, these voters have fallen into kind of 2 broad camps on Trump's performance. So there are the hopeful people who are glad he's doing something, and like they see all the motion, they see all the different things, and they're like, he's doing stuff. And they, I think, are starved after kind of 4 years of not hearing a lot from a president. So they're like really into the action. And then there are those who are getting squeamish about what's happening. And I would say that the dominant squeamishness isn't just that they're like, they don't like what's happening. It's more that they really wanted that laser focus on the economy. And they're starting to feel like things are not getting better. It's not even getting paid attention to, and maybe it's getting worse. So let's start with kind of the hopeful crowd and how these folks talk about Donald Trump.
I think things are going pretty fast. It's kind of like one of those things where he has a method to his madness. And right now we're just in those beginning stages to kind of see what the outcome is going to be. But at least he's acting on it. I mean, everything is very much like you can see it happening. Me personally, I have a lot of federal workers in my family. I just stopped working for the federal government like less than a year ago too. So I'm actually really happy about that, because I would have been one of the individuals who would have had to come back into work and experience the huge drastic change.
A lot was said in the last 4 years, but nothing was really done. And finally, like, yes, everything's been moving fast, but I think because we're so used to nothing happening the last 4 years, where it's like now stuff is happening within the first month, where it's like stuff shouldn't take 4 years for one thing to happen when it could be done in like the first week, which was made happen. So I think things are going well. We'll see what happens the next 3-6 months, but hopefully things keep improving.
I think Trump is somewhat of a dish of contradiction, but I think that's his style. Y'all are talking about the speed with which things have happened, and yet I'm just glad that it's being done in a little bit more systematic way than the first time when he was president. I think that he's doing a better job of looking knowledgeable and possibly being prepared. I have a son that lives in England, and so my international radar is up. And so I'm a little concerned about the way things have been handled from an international relationship standpoint, but I think there's probably some method to the madness.
I would say you have a lot of sort of imperfect people making a lot of big, broad changes, and there's some good to it, some bad to it, but for the most part, I'm excited. I mean, I've been a Democrat for a long time, and I've had enough. And with all the campaign promises, he's doing what he said he was going to do, so it's not a surprise. Yes, are some of the strokes a bit broad? Sure, but overall, I think I've had enough. I mean, my food bill is bigger than my mortgage right now.
Everything that's happening, it's happening a lot faster than I thought. But everything that comes up, I say, yep, I remember him saying he was going to do that. I remember him saying he was going to do that. So at least, my little scorecard, I'm like, yep, which is a little different than the first time he was around because he didn't get to transportation. That was something I was watching.
Of course, Elon, always say you can't fix a moving car. So it looks chaotic right now, but the fact that he is finding waste and fraud, and even though his team, I think, are like young Treasury officials, they are finding these issues that we've all been complaining about our tax money going to. So I don't really have a problem with Elon. I mean, he's a billionaire. I know some people had a problem with him getting the financial or our information, but everyone has their information. The dark web has our information, so I don't really see it as a big problem. Also, I think Elon's artistic. I think he even spoke about that. So he is a little kooky anyway, and he has, some issues. But I think him being a businessman, and I think that's also how Trump looks at it. America is a corporation. So in order to prevent a corporation from going bankrupt or insolvent, you have to make cuts.
Okay, so I think listening to this, the thing that strikes me the most is how every single person knows what Doge is. And I having done focus groups now for years and years and years, the idea that there's a government program or something is happening in the government or there's a big bill, the idea that every voter would know what it is actually pretty extraordinary. And so I think it demonstrates well the implications of having a TV producer as president. I know he's not the producer, but he understands big productions. And people spent 4 years telling me how Joe Biden didn't do anything like that. And I still hear it all the time. You heard a few people say it in these clips. He didn't do anything, which is not true. So I've got my own ideas about why this is, but what lesson either do you take from it? And also, what do you think? I mean, our politics is changing really in the way that people absorb information. But so what do you take away from this idea that everyone knows what Doge is, everyone can sort of see what's happening and has at least an impression of what he's doing? They could name a few things, all of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is extraordinary. Like you said, I mean, what was Al Gore's thing? Was reinventing government back in the Clinton days, which was, a pretty big operation. I'm guessing that if you interviewed 20 voters, maybe 2 or 3 would be familiar with the reinventing government initiative. Obviously, a whole different world, no internet or, for all intents and purposes and so forth. I do think a part of this does go to something I think we talked about, Sarah, which is, not only is Trump a shamelessly effective communicator and marketer and salesman and all of those words, he fills a major, major vacuum of communication from the last administration. I mean, I think, literally one of the focus group people from before just said, look, the last 4 years, with Biden, there was a whole lot of talk and no action whatsoever. I mean, in fact, you could make a case that it was 180 degrees the opposite.
The opposite.
There was a lot of action. There was no talk whatsoever, and it wasn't just Biden. I mean, Biden was, probably the single one of the worst, presidential communicators we've had in a long, long time. But and it trickled down to what was a very ineffective messaging operation. I think it helps. Yes, that Trump was a TV producer, is a TV producer, but also that the message machine of the right, whether it's Fox, whether it's the podcasters, whether it's various things on the internet, is so powerful right now, so amplified by each other. It is a massive echo chamber of, in many cases, misinformation, but it is very, very powerful, and it works very closely in lockstep with Trump and his organization and his White House and so forth. So I think that helps. Again, I think we'll see how it plays over time, but I do think, to the point I think we talked about, it fills a vacuum, and so this was a vacuum that is just dying to be filled by the most willing filler of said vacuum out there.
All right, focus group listeners, I have a podcast rec for you. In wild times like these, do you ever just want to break the rules? I don't mean by Greenland break the rules, but I know it can be important to rethink some of the dumb rules that we follow for no good reason. Well, that's exactly what friend of the Bulwark, Glenn Galich, gets into on his show, Break Fake Rules. Here, Glenn and guests dig into the self-imposed rules that hold us back, particularly in philanthropy, to uncover which rules we should commit to breaking together for a better society. Just break fake rules in a cool way, not in an Elon way. You'll hear even more from me and other insiders in politics, government, philanthropy, media, and more who are refusing to live by fake rules. If you've ever wondered why we live by certain rules or dreamed of what becomes possible when we do things differently, tune into Break Fake Rules. New episodes drop monthly wherever you get your podcasts. You and I did talk about this for one of your pieces, and because it's long been my contention that Trump, and actually this is a formulation a little bit by my buddy Jonathan last here at the Bulwark about like our nervous systems and what they're built for. And so Trump like really aggravated all of our nervous systems back in 2016 with like the barrage of the way he communicated and following tweet to tweet. But at the end of the day, over time, right, we sort of got used to this notion that the president of the United States was setting the conversation each day. We were reacting to it. He was pushing out, yes, it was in all caps and it was insane. Back then it was on Twitter. And then Joe Biden came in with this, we're going to restore normalcy, right? We're going to go back to sort of, you can ignore me from time. You don't have to know what your president's thinking on the toilet every morning. And like, I'm not going to fire somebody every day and create constant drama. And there were just enough people who wanted that. And we were also in the middle of a pandemic. And like, there were just enough people who wanted to go back to that sort of normality, or who were frustrated by Trump during COVID or kind of sick of him. But 4 years of not being communicated with after everybody had gotten used to it just left people with like a hole in their lives around how presidents communicate with them. And I think there's a reason that people would sort of accuse the media of wanting Trump back or whatever. And it's because Trump was a content machine. He's still a content machine. And I guess this is, I don't know. You're not a strategist. So I'm not looking for you to tell me what Democrats should do. But you are smart.
If they did ask me, I would tell them, but they never asked.
But you were in the communications business. And I guess this really does come down to how Donald Trump has changed the communications infrastructure for presidents. Like, people were used to getting from our phones, people talking directly to us now. And Trump has that parasocial relationship with his voters that, like, Democrats, they're just not there yet on how they build that. It's like, what do they do? How do you change? It's like, you got to catch up with the times. It's like a wholesale change in orientation.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I mean, the most sophisticated I could probably be on this is extremely unsophisticated, which is kind of. I mean, ideally, it would seem like the country would benefit. A critical mass of the country would benefit from some kind of Goldilocks approach, in which you had someone who had the communication will that Donald Trump has, the sense of decency that maybe Joe Biden had. I don't know, something in the middle, that someone with a basic instinct for unity, for goodwill, but who also had such a force of personality that was not easily vilified as a liberal populist or a conservative populist and so forth. I mean, I guess somewhat maybe Obama had a little of that at first, but he was quickly vilified by the right. But I do think that there is so many lessons from the Trump communication strategy that I actually sort of expected the Biden team to co-opt, which is, just not being afraid to be a salesman as president, not being afraid to boast even a little bit. I mean, Biden, maybe he was normal, maybe he was boring, maybe he was non-communicative, but he also was retro. I mean, he went back to sort of an 70s, 80s style of pure reserve. And, look, Democrats desperately need some personalities. They need someone who just feels like fresh. And again, I mean, maybe they'll emerge, maybe they won't. But I mean, Trump, I do think I'm a big believer in the sort of Harris-Walz sort of after the fact sort of post-mortem, which said, I wish they hadn't been so scripted, so cautious, so forth. And I think, Walz to some degree is trying to, course correct now after the fact, and it looks like he'll probably run again. But no, I don't know. I think that there are countless lessons that Democrats should try to learn from Donald Trump's approach that they haven't even begun to try to do yet.
And let me just, because you brought up the right-wing media ecosystem, I just want to chat about this for 1 second. Because to me, what is different about what Trump did, and we talk about the right-wing media ecosystem, but there's also a Trump media ecosystem. And it's built on like an incentive structure, like even like a financial incentive. Like Trump created a financial infrastructure for people who said, well, the mainstream media is telling us why Trump's bad all the time. I'm looking for people to tell me why Trump is good and the Democrats are bad. And that, it turns out, drove a lot of clicks. And Trump was like, I'm going to give you endless content about why we're great. And then you can come along behind me, influencer class or whatever you are, podcasters, and you can tell people why you're great and you'll make money and I'll be president. And we're all going to have this whole, and like Democrats, like it is, because you don't want to be like, dear Democrats, our advice is please be shameless. Create financial incentives for all your communicators. Like, that's not it.
Right.
And yet it is the thing that has changed the game for the right in a way that the left is just nowhere close to replicating.
Right. I mean, a lot of the infrastructure was in place before Trump. I mean, Fox News was extremely powerful before Trump came along. And they were an extremely powerful message machine, but it was usually in opposition. I mean, it was in opposition to Obama, in opposition to even Clinton, I guess, but just Democrats in general, Hillary certainly. But, and Trump's, relationship with Fox hasn't been a straight line either. I mean, they've certainly, they've had their moments. But I do think that, Trump has made them. I mean, he has given them a rallying figure as opposed to, Obama as a negative rallying figure or the Clintons as a negative rallying figure and so forth. So I don't know. I mean, Democrats have failed at this a million different ways, whether it's, the failure of Air America, the relatively lower ratings of the non-Fox cable outlets. And, there are some, I guess podcasts is sort of maybe an area where it's more of an even playing field at this point, but who knows? I think, I don't know. I mean, we've sort of said for a while that it's just, conservative things, cults of personality, and now MAGA and Donald Trump, easier to just sort of catch the lizard brains of your listeners or your viewers or what have you. And Donald Trump is perfect for that because he's an entertainer also. But, whatever, Democrats, I do think that they have obviously a lot of work to do in finding and creating outlets that now, Republicans and Trumpers are many, many laps ahead on.
Yeah. Well, I do think they're going to have to find figures and leaders that people get excited and feel incentivized to go out and like slug away for to kind of help build that ecosystem. It's not just sort of the infrastructure alone. Like you need the content. Okay, all right. This is like it's like a whole other podcast that we could go on for a long time. So I want to talk now about the other crowd though, because this is coming up now in I think a lot of these groups where they supported Trump, they voted for him, but they're a little bit like shell-shocked by what he's doing, and they're not sure they love it. Let's listen.
I think Trump is moving, like everybody's saying, kind of too fast with everything. But I'm more concerned about his long-term, where it's going to get us and where we're going to be at. And the way he's going about things, I think I don't know if it's really touch and go, especially like with the IRS people and all of them and everything. Having them fill out a form trying to find out what they did last week is kind of something that shouldn't be part of losing a job and stuff.
It is moving a lot quicker than I expected. Certain things such as the federal workers, it's a little bit concerning. And then I'm a investor on the side. So look at my portfolio the last 3 days, just been terrible. So that's not helping any. But other than that, it's evolving, right?
I wanted a lot of change as far as inflation and the price of everything. So I haven't seen any real changes there. As a matter of fact, I think for me, things are worse as far as the inflation. And then a lot of the communications that I'm used to getting about certain things, such as the extent of certain diseases, are not coming like I would like. So I'm not real happy right now with how things are going at all.
Trump only got Elon in there because he funded him and backed him up and supported him. I don't think Trump really wanted Elon there. I think it's taken away Trump's being in the center of the circle. I think it could have been done a little bit more discreetly and more checks and balance and find out what exactly is going on instead of throwing Elon out there and say, hey, here's your fish, go see what you can get at this pond and see what you catch.
I didn't expect him to be in that role, or even when I'm voting for Trump, I knew that he is there, but there are so many billionaires or so many other powers support any candidacy, right? It doesn't mean that they need to be 100% involved, like cutting jobs, changing things matter. Like, he's not also an elected person. He was like put there by Trump.
I'm disappointed right now in the seeming lack of planning here. There's a lot of babies getting tossed out with the bathwater, to use an old-fashioned phrase, in this first few weeks. And of course, as usual, and I'm disappointed about this with President Trump because he served before, we're just forfeiting respect internationally daily. If we had a drinking game where everyone took a drink when the word reverse course or walking this back, we'd be drunk in 20 minutes.
Federal government employee cut was done very, I would say, brutishly, and there is a process for everything. I want change. That's why I voted in different ways, but there should be a manner and also relationship that we build across the country.
I feel like things are going really, really good and really, really bad at the exact same time. Things that I think are going really, really bad, like firing the people who handle nuclear weapons and then realizing who you fired and then having to like about switch, like, hey, don't go, we need you. We can't have a nuclear disaster, come back. Like, that's crazy. Even to the point of like, okay, we've had the Constitution for like over 200 years. Even if you're not like the world's most constitutional expert, the whole thing, like, you're born here, you're a citizen, that was decided long before any of us were ever born, way before. So, like, to say, hey, I know we've got this like 200-year Constitution, but you know what? I think I'll just make an executive order. Like, it's crazy. We had a whole Constitution specifically so that people can just show up and just make rules just because. So that's crazy. Things that I think are going good. I'm glad that something's being done about children being able to get hormone therapy treatments and sex change treatments like before they're adolescent, before they even get a chance to mature.
Okay, I want to talk about that last guy specifically just for a second, because this to me is really illustrative of something where he's like, he sees it. He's like, this is insane. They fired a bunch of people who are controlled of the nuclear arsenal. They're dismantling the Constitution. And I don't know, the Constitution's important. It's there so that people can't just come in and be like, I make the rules all of a sudden. But I do like that the trans kids can't get their hormone therapy. And like, kind of like that's the equal, he gives that equal weight in the very, very good, very, very bad camp. But what do you think when you hear voters talking about this particular piece where they're like, I'm not sure I like this? What stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, a couple things. I mean, one, as a reporter, I mean, you're always looking for connections and trends. It's like, okay, how we just heard like, 9 and 10 random-ish voices, and what's the connective tissue here? This is, I don't do this as much as you do, obviously, but it's always surprising that, God, everyone latches on to one thing that sort of they pick out of the noise machine, or an issue that's important to them, whether it's nuclear safety or trans kids getting hormones and so forth. The other thing is just how many people still very early on in their comments will say, well, the speed of this is really refreshing, or something to that effect. The change, just the fact of the change, is, we like it. And I guess that's almost by definition the two components of a honeymoon. You sort of, there is newness, there is a perception and a reality actually of change. And, Trump, just by nature of his persona, I mean, it's a velocity. It's just a, it's a drinking from a fire hose kind of thing. And, that still seems, exhilarating to a number of people when you hear them saying that now. But if you listen to focus groups from like 6 weeks ago, it's less so. You heard a lot of the same. Now he's doing something. This is really exciting. Well, this is what we brought him in for. We voted for change. We're getting it. More muted now compared to then.
I agree with that. I do think, I did an episode that was basically called "At Least He's Doing Something," because that is what we were hearing from everybody. And, people would ask, I had a lot of people saying, like, are you picking up any regret? And I'd say, not really. And it was really in the last couple of weeks that we started to see more people. And part of this was kind of Elon related. I think where you started to see people really, like, they all know what Doge is. They're sort of on board with cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. But then there's your people who are like on board with move fast, break things. And then there's the people who are like, shouldn't there be some kind of way in which this is being evaluated? Aren't checks and balances still a thing? And I want to be clear actually about something, because something happened to me where I went on Nicole Wallace and I talked about hearing the very first tinges of the buyer's remorse a couple weeks ago. And somebody like memed me, like did like a Yas Queen resistance thing of like, Trump voters regret what they're doing. And I was like, oh no. Because that is not the preponderance of what I'm hearing. The preponderance of what I'm hearing from Trump voters writ large is they're like, heck yes. Like, let's drink liberal tears. Let's hit the gas. This is great. Elon's in there. RFK's in there. Trump's in there, and they're getting this thing done. And you guys hate it. Go cry. And so that is, I think, most Trump voters. The people that I'm talking to are people who are first-time Trump voters, right? They voted for Biden last time. And so they are in a category of people that had to be persuaded this last time to vote not for the Democrats, but for Trump again, after choosing not to last time. So they're an interesting group to me. And I think they're the first. It's sort of like what's that LIFO, last in, first out? Like, they tend to be the ones, they're not deep committed MAGA, so they can be the ones who could swing back. You are hearing from them now a real sense of, and in this group, and a couple of the groups, the word fast and too fast, like, was real. Like, they were starting to get very uncomfortable with how much stuff was happening. And I wonder if you think, I don't know if this is a theory, but it seems to me like Trump is trying to go so fast in part because and it's why he relies on this idea that he has a mandate, right? Right after winning the election, in the first 100 days, he can dismantle a lot of stuff and say, this is what people wanted me to do. Because as soon as he's down at 40% or 30, he's in the 30s, he's going to have a much harder time jamming through what he wants to get done.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because when I talk to people about just this, about change, maybe moving too fast and so forth, people tend to pick, they pick up on things that are true, but like probably not as big a deal as they think. Like, a lot of people mentioned to me, I was with a bunch of voters I was out in Kentucky recently, and FAA stuff, like these little plane crashes we're seeing. Not little, but I mean, there have been no plane crashes in however many years. Suddenly you hear stories of planes falling out of the sky, right? You hear people talking about the measles thing in Texas, right? I mean, that's, there are complicated reasons for this, but I mean, this seems like, well, this is the price of moving too fast. The gentleman before mentioned the nuclear stuff, which it's part of the unevenness and seemingly the chaos that could have a really big and catastrophic effect on this. So I do think that over time there will be more examples that possibly, hopefully nothing terrible happens, but people are latching on to things that they assume or suspect could be a product of whatever speed is happening now that they don't really fully understand. And look, you're going to probably be hearing less about, oh well, this is the change we voted for, because there'll be more material to work with.
Yeah, I also think what's going to happen is at some point, all of these moves start to have negative personal consequences on real people. Like right now, right, when you do USAID first and you do the government agencies first, like that takes time to trickle down to everyone else. Like in DC right now, I don't want to use the word there's pandemonium. There's just people, like lots of people have lost their jobs.
Right.
Lots of people are freaked out. Lots of crazy stuff is happening at the agencies. If you're in this city, because it's a political town and it's filled with people who work at these agencies, like you are getting just the wildest ride. But if you're out somewhere beyond, you're not necessarily feeling the consequences of this yet.
Right. Right. There's two groups that I'm guessing Trump and Trump's people, and mostly Trump's voters, have zero sympathy for. It's the people that, our neighbors, right? I mean, who we know who are either losing jobs or worried about losing jobs, or their workplace has been turned upside down. And also, frankly, I mean, the USAID stuff is or will be very soon catastrophic to the people that USAID actually helps in poor countries around the world. But eventually, it's going to come home, and not to Washington, D.C. or, somewhere in Africa. It's going to be, it's going to be Social Security checks. It's going to be, public health stuff, like whether it's measles or whatever, safety stuff, whether it's FDA, FAA, whatever. And that's where, these things go from being symbolic to real life concerns. And again, so, I mean, in a way, this is an easy first kind of bunch of cuts and targets for the Trump administration to go after.
For the first couple months, it felt like Elon was everywhere. Do you feel like he's been benched a little bit? I feel like he's been pulled back slightly.
Maybe a little, not as much as I thought he would have been. I mean, I probably would have thought that this marriage would have lasted a month. So it still seems to be going fairly strong. Not sure what Trump says or thinks about him privately. I mean, it would seem that him, taking so much oxygen from an administration that he obviously wants to control and be the center of would be problematic for him. But on the other hand, he's also both a force multiplier of chaos and also, someone who looks like an attack dog or attack doge. Clever, huh? Where he can just he can sort of he is a kind of deputy chaos guy or sort of full partner in chaos that helps him achieve whatever it is he wants to achieve.
Yeah, and as Kara Swisher said when she was on this podcast, he's also like a heat shield, right? Like Elon's numbers go down, and Trump's like, whatever, those aren't my numbers,
right?
And you do hear a lot of Elon concern among these voters. Okay, right. I want to close on another possible roadblock for Trump that has been part of what I'm hearing from voters when they express their nervousness about the future, and that is the tariffs. So, I know from listening to voters for all the years and really going up to the election that like so many of the not MAGA types, but just whatever kind of voters who were like, things are too expensive. Things are too expensive. You heard it all the time. It's why a lot of people wanted change. And so they wanted Trump to bring costs down. He's a businessman. He's gonna make things cheaper. Trump promised he would make things cheaper. And what we're hearing, like when people are like, my costs are not going down, we heard some of this in the sound before. And one of the things that I think is hurting people's sense of going forward is that they're worried about what the tariffs are going to do. Let's listen.
As far as the tariffs go and everything, I think he's doing the right thing, but I think he's trying to give people the benefit of the doubt. He's telling, we're going to give you another month, try to work out something. Because like right now, I'm in the market, I want to buy a new car, but I'm scared because with the tariffs right now, what's going to happen? I don't want to say it's going to hit me, but it's going to come to the consumer some way or another.
Like I work on the automotive sector, and the tariff is going to hit them big. Like it might be 1 month down, but it doesn't matter for automotives because you can't actually move the factory overnight. So it's a lot to take in because it will impact like lots of people's job and my job also. So I am going to get impacted firsthand. I'm not saying that I'm going to lose a job, but there is going to be cuts, definitely, because if you have to bring in parts and logistics from Mexico, from Canada, and if you have to spend more money on those, you definitely will cut money somewhere else because we don't have infinity of those, right?
Not knowing what's going to happen down the road, it's going to hit us one way or another, but just how big of an impact it's going to make is what we got to find out, how people are going to deal with it and how consumers are going to react to it. I mean, everything you buy, is overseas from somewhere. Bringing everything to the States would be great, but it's not going to happen overnight.
The reason he's putting them is main concern. He was like talking about like the fentanyl crisis. If he's like same thing with Mexico and Canada. He's like, as long as you guys are able to lower this and stop this, he's like, then we'll kind of like remove the tariffs, which I understand. So I'm hoping that they can negotiate, being like, hey, like we'll do our job, we'll lower the tariffs on both ends, and then it'll maybe go back to like normal. I don't know. I feel like that's going to happen, actually. I don't think the tariffs are going to last for too long because I feel like it's going to hurt both countries anyways.
If you look at any of the consumer sentiment dropping and the markets moving, it really is because of the tariffs. Like Americans, and I'm surprised, I don't know if I'm surprised, but you do hear a lot of voters in the groups. People have jobs, they live in the economy. And so they can tell you when stuff that's happening is going to impact their sector. And so, whether it's people who are trying to buy a car or they work in the automotive industry, but I also hear people they work for contractors or they work in the healthcare industry, and they'll say like, well, I haven't lost my job yet, but people around me have, or I know people who have. And at some point that does, I guess, why aren't Democrats making a bigger deal about these tariffs? Because, I mean, of all the economic policies that have broken through, tariffs are the things that you hear voters say, I'm worried about this, I don't want it.
Yeah, I mean, tariffs, I think to some degree, it's kind of an academic concept in some ways. I mean, I think it's something that, at least before Trump, economists talked about tariffs. Tariffs bad. I mean, free market conservative Republicans said tariffs bad. I mean, the more pro-tariff part of the political spectrum used to be, Dick Gephardt Democrats, right? Like sort of like a lot of Rust Belt kind of Democrats who believe that there was just not an even playing field. Trump loves tariffs partly because it's a vehicle for him to fight with people who were our friends, right? I mean, no one wanted a war with Canada. No one wanted a war with certainly Panama. I mean, Mexico maybe, but it's like, look, I mean, what Canadians can do about like the spread of fentanyl across the borders, commensurate to the kind of damage that this is supposedly motivating Donald Trump to inflict on both the Canadian and the American economy, is kind of nuts if you sort of think about it. But no, I mean, you're right, though. These people, and I was sort of struck and frankly quite impressed by the level of sophistication about people knowing the effects of what tariffs can do. I mean, they know more about me as a consumer, I would not have had that level of sophistication. But I also, not only do people live in the economy, they live in the stock market. And it does seem like, the idea of tariffs and the kind of, what they seem to be like the biggest cause in a lot of people's minds about inflation not getting better. You would think that itself would be problematic for Trump, because it's not like he's given a great academic explanation for why tariffs are good. I mean, he just takes the brute force. Well, we're being ripped off, and that's going to stop now. So therefore, this is happening, and it shows I'm getting tough with China and Canada and what have you. So I don't know. I mean, I do think though that there is a bigger awareness than I would have thought about the damage or potential damage of tariffs.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, and this is it's like a whole other episode, but the thing that is in Trump's numbers more under the hood, not just in the fave on fave, but is specifically when you ask people about his handling of the economy, which has always been his best number. People give Trump the businessman vibes on the economy, and those numbers are bad for Trump right now. And this is where, to me, the peril of the future lies in these kinds of voters who are giving him the benefit of the doubt. They're still open-minded. They're still on a honeymoon. So they're waiting and seeing. But like this, economy, a macro good economy, ate Joe Biden's presidency alive because of the inflation and the price of things. I mean, it's all you hear from people. How do you think things are going in the country? Bad. Everything's too expensive. Housing's too expensive. Gas is too expensive. You know, the grocery store bills are too expensive. Trump was elected more or less to fix that. And the more he does all this other stuff, there is a group of voters who are like, that is not what I elected you to do. I want stuff to get cheaper, and that's it.
Yeah. No, if there's like a leading indicator, and this batch of polls that came out in the last week or so, over last weekend, a few of them did. I mean, the leading indicator of the lagging indicator of the economy voters, you know, being lower for Trump, like a really bad number for Trump compared to what it was the first term, compared to his overall rating, which is pretty good. I mean, high 40s in a lot of these surveys, to me is quite problematic potentially for Trump, because look, the economy voters were his base. I mean, you know, it's a different kind of base than, you know, the demographic MAGA hardcore base. But I mean, you know, the sort of suburban, you know, I assume a lot of Biden to Trump voters here, they loved him on the economy. I assume it would be like a top 2 or 3 issue for them when they were casting their vote coming in, you know, last fall. And, you know, that doesn't improve easily either. And it's not like the economy is showing, you know, great signs, and, you know, inflation isn't showing great signs. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's something that Trump has to be worried about, or his people certainly do.
I just want to ask you as a last question, because you know, some of these folks talking about tariffs were talking about the foreign policy implications, and sort of speaking of Trump's fraying relationships around the world. You spent Trump's inauguration day in Greenland, which is it the red, white, and blue land? Is that where we're going with
not
this?
Not yet, man. But you never know. He does. You know, every time he brings it up, that you know, it just freaks out so many people there, and actually in Europe too. So.
I believe it. I mean, because I think maybe in America we have, for better or worse, again going back to our nervous systems, developed some of these defense mechanisms around he's not going to do that. This is a distraction. This is one of those things. He's like the laser pointer getting us all to focus on this. Well, he dismantles the government. But if you're Canadian, you're like, this madman, is America going to invade us? And they're starting a trade war with us. Why wouldn't they start a regular war? Like, if I were Canadian, I wouldn't like it one bit.
I wouldn't either. No, I mean, it's existential. This is not a side issue for them. I mean, so in Greenland, I love being able to.
Yeah, tell me about Greenland.
Well, so first of all, I was there for like almost 12 days. Originally, it was supposed to be 5 days. So
is it nice? Do we even want it?
Well, the minerals are. I thought it was beautiful. I mean, what I saw was beautiful. It was really weird. I never thought I'd go there. People were lovely, although there are very few of them. I mean, it's like. The biggest, the capital of Nuuk is like 15,000. The whole country is like smaller than, you know, Bethesda, Maryland, and it's like the size of 3 Texases, right? I didn't get out of Nuuk much because I was snowed into Nuuk, which means that like 10 different flights were canceled that could have gotten me out of the country. I wouldn't recommend, you know, 12 days in January for anyone, but I thought it was kind of beautiful. And there'll be direct flights to Nuuk from Newark starting in June, at least in the warm weather months. So I would recommend that to anyone. But what was interesting, though, is, you know, they thought that going into the inauguration, they thought, well, kind of quirky, you know, biggest country in the world, and Donald Trump keeps mentioning us, like, wow, we're getting some attention. You know, usually we're just this innocuous slab on the map that no one really thinks about. Maybe he'll mention us. Maybe we'll get a line in the inauguration address. So I went to some watch party for a bunch of members of Parliament and political activists in the House of Parliament, right? And they were all sort of like watching, and after like maybe 5 minutes, when it was clear that Trump was taking a rather menacing tone with his address, everyone was like, please don't mention us. Don't mention us. We don't want to be anywhere near the speech. Then he mentioned Panama. Then he mentioned the Gulf of America. I think he mentioned Canada. Usually they come after Canada. But then he flipped right. He went directly to Mars. So, you know, so that was, they left Greenland out. So there was definitely a sigh of relief there. But no, I mean, look, if Trump wants to do something predatory to Greenland, there's nothing they can do about it. I mean, I guess theoretically NATO troops, you know, would defend a NATO territory on behalf of Denmark, which owns it. But I would love to avoid that, and I'm pretty sure the Greenlanders and the Danish and pretty much everyone else would like to avoid that too. But again, this all kind of operates on Donald Trump's whim.
Yeah. Well,
on that note,
all right. Well, Greenland, we wish you the best and with your independence.
It is beautiful, and the food was good, and the people were great, and don't go in January.
Okay. Noted.
Yes, noted.
Mark Leibovich, thank you so much for joining us. And thanks to all of you for listening to another episode of the Focus Group Podcast. We'll be back next week. But in the meantime, remember to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to The Bulwark on YouTube, and become a Bulwark Plus member at thebulwark.com. See you later.